you die. Sadly, in my movies, everyone dies.
Tiffany, and I'm the new kid on the block in the true crime content land. I've been fascinated by the darker side of life, the more morbid corners of society for longer than I can remember, long before it ever became sort of trendy or mainstream. On this channel, I will be peeling back the layers of various criminal cases. I plan to do this with a no-holds-barred approach. My primary focus will always be on the cases that truly shake us, the real shitty stuff. So tonight, I've decided to start off with a crime that is kind of close to home because it involves a South African immigrant in Alaska. You may or may not have heard of the memory card killer. When a person is murdered, more often than not, we rely on the perpetrator to tell us the truth about what really happened. We're required to trust that what they're sharing is the genuine truth, which is obviously tricky because these people are typically well-versed liars. In this story, that is not the case. In this story, the evidence doesn't lie. So even though Bryan Steven Smith says to this day that he did not commit the crime, the evidence doesn't lie because the camera doesn't lie.
I don't want to act stupid, but I don't remember anything. I don't remember anything. Okay.
Today we're diving into the case of Bryan Steven Smith, a South African-born Alaskan immigrant who had a capacity for unimaginable violence. Our story begins not with the crime itself, but rather with a gruesome discovery in September 2019 in Anchorage, Alaska. A woman named Valerie Kessler, sources described as a convicted criminal, a drug addict, a sex worker, stole a mobile phone from Bryan Steven Smith after he had picked her up to spend the evening with him. During that evening, Bryan stopped at a garage, leaving Valerie in the car. She dropped her phone, and when she reached down to pick it up, she saw that there was another phone in the car. She admittedly decided in that moment to steal the phone. Upon returning back to her tent, she went through the phone to see if she could find, as she says, like anybody that she might know. But what she did not anticipate was finding what she did. There was a video file on the phone that had been named Homicide at Midtown Marriott. Valerie, having no idea what was going to be shown to her, watched the video. What she was about to witness was the gruesome murder of a woman. The entire act was carried out over a period of over half an hour, when at this stage, it was just the last half an hour of hours and hours of torture. The woman in the video was very clearly heavily beaten up, to the point that she was unrecognizable, which Valerie will come to understand just how badly unrecognizable this woman was at a later stage. Valerie knew what she had to do, but she was nervous to go to the police. It took her a couple of days to decide that the right thing to do was to take that risk. She transferred the file onto an SD card. And the story is, she says she was running through the forest. So the tent that she stayed in was in a forested area. She fell. She claims that she lost both the phones that she had with her at that time, which of one of them was Bryan's. But she still had the SD card. She took it to the police station and gave it to the detective and said, look, you need to have a look at this. There's evidence of a murder. When the detectives played the video, they came to see that the footage on that card had captured the torture and murder of 30-year-old Alaskan Native woman, Kathleen Jo Henry. They immediately began their investigation. It was established that the video was taken within the first week of September in 2019. Sources indicate that Kathleen had undergone 2 days of torture. During the video, you can hear Bryan sort of narrating his way through this video as if he's making a movie. It's actually his ego is quite overwhelming in that. And he says some horrific things.
People need to cooperate. People need to know when they're serial killers.
You live, you die.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Are you still alive?
I was so tired.
Face the camera, bitch.
Sadly, in my movies, everyone dies.
So while detectives were listening to this video, you can hear that Brian's accent is quite distinct and clearly not an American accent. While watching the video, another detective happened to come past and overheard the audio and called the detective aside and said, "I recognize that voice. It's a very distinctive accent, and I recently actually interviewed this guy for a different case." And they were then able to tie the video and the SD card to Brian Stephen Smith. In his 40s, Brian had met somebody online in an online game, a woman by the name of Stephanie, who lived in Alaska. And they took their conversation off of the game and began texting and calling, and soon fell in love. At the age of 42 in 2014, Brian decided he was going to emigrate. Him and Stephanie would be married, he would emigrate to Alaska, and he said that after life just didn't seem to be working out for him in South Africa, he just kind of thought, well, why not? Let's see if I can make this work somewhere else. Once in Alaska, truly absorbing the beauty of a stunning, stunning land, he got his video camera out and recorded quite a bit of his experiences.
It's the beaver dam. I don't know if this GoPro can pick it up, but there's a little beaver house over there.
It's very similar to Africa. You've got the civilized, and then you've got the whole ethnic, rural, indigenous side of things. People that are living in an absolute, totally different world to what we live in.
Stephanie was or is a very outgoing social person, and Brian is not so much, very much more a reclusive type of personality. And he said he thought that he might be able to make it work, but soon realized that he was struggling with that. With that, he started to explore other things to keep him entertained. Soon, Brian started taking part in some extramarital activity. Brian met Alicia Youngblood at work, and they soon became friends, and he would say they became drinking buddies at first, and then things started escalating into something more sexual. What was appealing to Brian was that Alicia seemed to like the sort of more rough side of things in the bedroom, and he said that, one of the things that attracted him to her was that she was responsive to his tendencies as well. One of the things that they seemed to enjoy getting off on was sharing violent stories. So going through their texts, they would often talk about these imaginary scenarios of something violent happening or them doing something violent to something else. So Alicia would claim to have had many experiences, and Brian said that he knew that they weren't true. However, he wanted to please her. He wanted to seem appealing to her, and I kind of feel like he's using this as an excuse, like Alicia wanted me to do this, like I wanted to please Alicia, and so I thought that the best way to do this was to actually go forward and do something genuinely violent, which I'm not buying at all. One day he had sent her a video of what appeared to be a dead woman that he sexually molested while she was clearly dead, and this freaked Alicia out. She obviously wasn't expecting a real life scenario, and so Alicia did take this to the police. That's when this happened, and I'm not too sure why they didn't investigate it, but what she did do was almost become a bit of an informant at that stage and carried on the conversations with Brian, trying to elicit some more information, trying to elicit potentially more evidence of something. But she became afraid for her life and eventually stopped speaking to Brian and kind of went off the grid.
He's going in her, and then he'd draw his hand out and he'd hold in the GoPro, and then he'd wipe his hands on her leg. Y'all don't know what I'm doing to get this information. I'm doing all kinds of crazy sexual acts with him to get this information out of him and having to pretend to like it.
That, I believe, was about a year before the discovery of this SD card and the murder of Kathleen Jo Henry. So once the detectives had figured out this connection between the SD card and Brian, obviously they immediately began their investigation and got a warrant of arrest. Brian and his wife Stephanie were away at the time on holiday, and as soon as they landed back in the United States, they picked Brian up at the airport. In the interview, the detectives tell them about this SD card, but they don't say what's on the SD card. At this point, I can't quite tell, and it hasn't been clarified yet, if Brian ever knew that the SD card was missing yet, or that the phone was missing yet. So he's acting stupid. He's being like, oh, okay, so what's on this SD card? Do you want to show me? He's obviously still not sure if it's what it is that he thinks that it is, but let me first find out before I actually say anything else and incriminate myself further. On the SD card and on the phone was more than just that video. There was over 30 photos and videos. Just a couple of days after the detectives had come across this video, a body was found on the side of a highway. The remains were already skeletonized, and what they were able to determine was that this was a female, and she had long dark hair. Going through the other photos, that picture of the deceased person in the back of Brian's truck was taken and time-stamped in the same area that body was found. It became pretty obvious that the human remains found belonged to the woman on the video. During the interview, the detectives begin showing him photos. They start showing him just pictures of some of the women that are missing, a picture of Kathleen Jo Henry, and also a picture of the feet of the person that was taking the video. And in that moment, Brian's kind of like, okay, what do I do now? So he starts saying like, oh, well, it's obviously me, and I don't remember any of that. Yeah, that's so strange.
Can you tell me what's in that photo?
There's somebody's feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your shoes. I mean, it looks like the shoes you're wearing right now.
Yeah, it does, yeah. But what's happening when that's...
What's happening is on this video, on these images, the person that's recording it is holding the recorder and is standing basically above this girl and strangling her.
Okay. I don't want to act stupid, but I don't remember anything.
Okay.
So when they ask him about the body, the photo of the body in his truck, he says, okay, let me tell you what I do remember. He says, I know that the next day at work, he walked up to his truck and he noticed that there was blood coming out of it. And he opened up the truck and, oh my God, there's a dead person in my truck. And he did what any normal citizen would do. He decided to go and discard the body. So no, did not call the authorities, did not have a complete fucking meltdown, like what in the actual, nope. He decided he'll just go and throw the body off the side of a cliff. Very normal, right?
This sounds very serious, no matter what. I'm going to be in deep. So, okay, I'll tell you what I remember.
Okay.
The next day at work, I saw something dripping out the back of my truck. And I was like, what the hell? And I opened up, and there was somebody there underneath. There was a blue, like a tarp at the back of my truck. And the back flap doesn't really lock. I've actually put a padlock on now since then. And I saw somebody, and I was like, what the hell? What must I do? And then the one night I thought, well, I've got to get rid of this. I can't. And I drove out, and I did. I went and dumped it. So yeah, I did dump it, but
I think at this point he knows he's screwed, but he continues with his obviously, I mean, I can see that that's me, but I don't remember it. Even upon seeing the video evidence, he's like, well, yeah, he says, I can see, I mean, there's no doubt. He says, but I don't want to act stupid, but I don't remember any of that. So, they wrap up the interview. He's been there for a few hours. Now, keep in mind, sorry, I said landed back in the States. They were traveling from DC. They were on a holiday in DC. So it's like a 10-hour flight back to Alaska. And this is important later. Wrapping up the interview, and the detectives are packing everything up and they're walking away. And Brian turns around and says, are you guys in a hurry?
Are you guys in a rush to go home?
Are we in a rush?
Yeah.
You want to talk some more?
We're not in a rush.
We got all night.
5 hours into a police interrogation, Brian Stephen Smith had already confessed to the murder of Kathleen Henry.
If I'm going to burn on the electric chair for one, I might as well do it for two.
What? They immediately sit back down. They're like, okay, cool. No, we've got plenty of time. Very chill. What is it? And he said, well, I picked up this other woman, another homeless woman, and obviously picked her up to elicit sex from her. And they went back to his place, and he said that she was extremely drunk, and she passed out on the couch. And he said that after some time, he was worried because she had a bad smell, and tried to wake her up and insisted that she goes to have a shower because he was worried that the smell was going to kind of like linger around. His wife was out of town, and he was worried that when she came back into town, that smell would still be lingering. So he kept insisting that she goes to have a shower, and she kept pushing back and said, I don't want to. At this point, he said he just kind of had enough, and he went to his garage and he got his gun and he came back, and without any thought, with no emotion, he shot her right there on the couch. He then discarded of her body and told the detectives where, and very quickly they were able to determine that a human skull had actually been found there months earlier. The name of that woman was Veronica Abacek, another Alaskan native who had been missing for some time.
We're learning more tonight about the weeks surrounding the hotel killing of 30-year-old Kathleen Henry.
39 photos and 12 videos show in graphic detail the final hours of a dark-haired woman. The SD card where the files were stored was labeled Homicide at Midtown Marriott.
She was like all beat up. I mean, her face was not even recognizable.
Brian was inevitably convicted of both of these murders. So the court proceedings were televised. However, the judge obviously made the decision that nobody, including people in the court except for the jury, would be able to watch the video, which came with a very strong warning. And ultimately, Brian was convicted and sentenced to 226 years in prison for both the murders of Kathleen Jo Henry and Veronica Abacek. The judge stated that he did not believe that, the judge stated that he thought that Brian was beyond rehabilitation. It was also during the court proceedings that the public came to find out that sadly, Alicia Youngblood had taken her own life. While we don't know the details of why, I'm sure that having a relationship with Brian didn't help. So although she was unable to testify about the video that Brian had sent her, the court was still able to successfully sentence him for her murder. There is also the case of another woman who he was not, who they were unable to directly tie to, and this was a potential third victim by the name of Cassandra Boskovsky. Cassandra was also an Alaskan native who also had a history of alcohol abuse and homelessness. Cassandra was last heard from her family in around September 2019, which is right about the time that Brian Stephen Smith was actually caught. However, on the pictures that were found on the SD card from Brian's phone, there were pictures of a woman who was sadly, apparently bloody and battered and lifeless. And those photos did seem to align with what Cassandra looked like. Unfortunately, they were never able to tie the case. When asked about it, Brian said, no, those women were just passed out drunk. So let's talk about what Brian is saying now. Brian now says that he was interviewed by the detectives under duress. He states that after a 10-hour flight, he was in a weakened state. And he's now claiming that these stories are untrue and that he was just, I think what he's trying to do is saying that he was forced into a confession, which is absolute bullshit. One of the things that he claims now was Veronica Abuchek was just a story that he had concocted up to impress Alicia Youngblood. Imagine your story is so real that you manifested actual photos on your phone. He claims that that woman, if it was Veronica, would have walked out of his house with Alicia. So interesting, because Alicia is the one that actually went to the police and said, hey, I've got evidence that I believe that my boyfriend might have murdered someone. So I just don't know that Brian has the ability to speak without lying. And I genuinely wonder if he believes this himself. Could you really, I mean, when you've done something so horrific, do you really go to sleep at night thinking, I have just been so hard done by and I'm experiencing anybody's worst nightmare, being charged and convicted and sentenced for something that I didn't do. The problem is there is photographic and video evidence. So I don't know what is wrong with this man mentally. Never mind that, there is DNA evidence to corroborate that Veronica Abuchek was in his house, because once he confessed to her murder, they searched his house, they ripped up the carpet, they found DNA evidence that she was there. And again, like, you have to wonder. So he's saying that this is the story that he told the detectives, and it was just a fictional story to impress Alicia. Who on earth thinks that, okay, I am so desperate to impress a woman, I am so desperate to have sex with this woman that I will, in a police interrogation, spin a false story about the murder of somebody? To what end? Really? It's such bullshit. I can't listen to this guy. So when I watch the interviews with him, what I see is akin to a teenager or a kid that's been caught out in a lie. And they want to run with it. They're like going to stick to their guns, but they don't have the capacity to be able to hold a storyline or to keep the story straight. And that's what I see when I watch this man. He behaves like a child that's been caught out in a lie and is just like, well, I'm just going to spin it this way. No, but let's just, but actually this is what happened. And, you present more evidence, like, no, but this is actually like really what happened. It's a lot. Also, watching him in court, when they showed the video, obviously being the defendant, he was able to watch the video, and I'm watching his face, and I'll put it up here. And again, like, he is committed to the lie, because the way, in my opinion, that he's watching it, he knows that the world is watching him. He knows that the jury is watching him. And the expression on his face for me is almost like deliberate shock or confusion. Like, what is it that I'm watching?
Oh, for fuck's sake. Are you still alive?
I'm not so tired.
People need to cooperate. People need to know when they're being serial killers.
I'm not buying it. So something that there are cases that sit differently with me, the ones that sit with me a little bit longer. And these are when killers record their murders, because they're doing that because they want to revisit it in the most visual and tactile version they possibly can. And for me, it's those ones that I don't know, they tend to like make my stomach churn a little bit. So we have the toy box killers that did the same thing. I unfortunately decided to listen to that audio, and I have mentally blocked it out. It was actually too much for me to take. I don't know why I did it. It's, again, my morbid curiosity. I don't know if it's still available. I happened to find it. And that is one thing I can truly say I regret listening to. It is absolutely gut-wrenching. So something else I just want to touch on with Brian is that I don't think that these three women are his first. Just based on what I've learned throughout the years, listening to experts, listening to the professionals, is there is a pattern, there's a journey, so to speak, on how these killers get to the point that they're actually committing this level of violence, and on top of that, the recording of it, and so on and so forth. I just can't go to sleep believing that it's only these two, maybe three women. What we've seen with serial killers is they practice first. Okay, so sometimes we see that in childhood where they practice on animals. Now, from what we've seen and from what we've heard from people that knew Brian growing up with him and family, nobody seems to have come forward to say, yes, I saw something a bit weird, like his behavior was a little bit odd. He wasn't an extrovert, I'll put that out there. He definitely was an introvert from a young age, but nothing more alarming than that. So was he doing stuff in secret back then that no one saw? I don't know. Like, it's tricky for me. By the age of 40, you get to Alaska and you're carrying out this degree of depravity. You're carrying out horrific acts. So Veronica Abuchek, thank God she escaped torture, but he defiled the body afterwards and thought it was okay to take a video of that and then send it to another person. Kathleen Jo Henry, 2 days of torture. I mean, it just goes beyond my. Okay, hold on. I'm losing track here. I forgot to mention that Valerie Kessler, the one who stole the phone, discovered this horrific evidence and turned it in, and is the only reason that Brian is tucked safely away from society in prison for the rest of his life, knew both of the victims. So Veronica and her had been close friends for many, many years. So she was absolutely distraught to find out that she was one of his victims. But later on, she came to find out that she knew Kathleen Jo Henry as well. She just didn't recognize her on the video. That is how badly beaten up she was. That somebody who knew her well didn't even recognize her. As I was saying, there is a journey of learning. There is practice runs. They typically start off with smaller crimes, or I want to say less serious crimes. A lot of serial killers actually start off with becoming serial rapists before they escalate to murder. It's not always the case, so it's not a copy and paste situation. It's not a template that everybody follows, but certainly a serial killer doesn't just magically start serial killing. And I think it's important to highlight once again that those that are living, those that are marginalized, those that are living on the outskirts of society, I mean, these are real people with real problems, and they, given the choice, would not choose that life. Their circumstances, for the most part, have not given them much choice to live the life that they have. And this makes them vulnerable. It makes them easy targets. And sadly, we see this time and time again, that they are the ones that are targeted by serial killers. So where we stand right now is that, one, the US is doing further investigation on allegations of him lying on his during his process of naturalization, where obviously one of the questions is, have you committed a crime? I don't know if that's the exact question, but he said no, which just so happened to be right smack in the middle of when he was committing these exact crimes. I don't know what the impact of that finding is, if it's just more years on his sentence. I don't care. And I believe, but I cannot seem to find anything online to substantiate this, but it was said that apparently the South African authorities are also looking into Brian Stephen Smith and potentially any crimes that were committed in South Africa.
He told me one of his victims was as young as 15, where he's from. I think 15 was the youngest.
Okay.
But on the other hand, we don't know. We do not know, really.
I hope that you enjoyed my first video. I know it's not the best one. I will get better at this. It's going to take some practice. So if you have reached the end of the video, I just want to say thank you so much. And if you can please do all the YouTube things, if you can just, even if it's just one of them, like or subscribe, or comments, if you can just do that as a show of support. And I promise you my content is going to improve, and I'm looking forward to building up a little community here. Actually, a bigger community. That would be great. So thank you so much. Stay safe, and I will see you next week.
I got no one to talk to now.
What's that?
I got no one to talk to now, so none of my friends will ever.
Well,
this is my fault. I've dug my own grave here. I did this to myself. I can't blame anybody else,